Alright everyone, just have a video here about an article on the National Post. For those who don't know, the National Post is center-right, basically, and I wanted to use them, A, because this is the first one I found, so it worked out well, but also this is contradicting or criticizing conservatives, so would rather not use something like CBC. For those who do not know, the dairy industry in Canada is heavily regulated. Basically, it's quite difficult to start your own dairy farm because of this, and they call it supply management. I just call it socialism. And this is an article talking about a binder found from one of the lobbyists from the dairy industry, and some pretty interesting stuff was in here. So let's just get right into it. For decades, one of the most powerful lobby groups in Ottawa has been the Dairy Farmers of Canada. Former Finance Minister Joe Oliver, I know nothing about him, but apparently he was the finance minister at some point, has even compared their tactics to the famously uncompromising U.S. gun lobby. We'll be taking supply management from their cold, dead hands, Oliver wrote in 2016. Probably an interesting read, but we're not getting into that. And here we go. For the first time, something has been leaked from the Dairy Farmers of Canada in a briefing binder. It provides a unique window into those tactics. They're pretty messed up, to be honest. So, one, this is a very sophisticated operation. Probably true. Given what is in the rest of this article, I'd say that's quite correct. Dairy lobbying marketing usually focuses on portraying Canadian dairy farmers as a bunch of humble family farms trying to make a living. This is incredibly false. Basically, we're at the point now where it's so difficult to get a dairy farm that you have to be in one of the larger corporations for dairy farming. I mean, there's obviously some. There's always going to be some, but, you know, the different things that you have to do to produce any kind of dairy product in Canada, there's just so many different regulations, and it just pushes out competition, basically, by pricing anyone new out of the market, unless you've got a big chunk of change already, and even then, you have to convince one of the, I think there's like 3 actual producers of dairy products, so they'll be buying the raw milk. I don't know all of them. There's Lucerne and Beatrice. I think Beatrice is actually foreign, but I'm not entirely sure on that one. But there are not very many, and basically all you see in Alberta is Lucerne. There's just a lot of that. The binder reveals an incredibly sophisticated and well-funded political lobbying operation. The Dairy Farmers of Canada delegate included 25 people from across the country. They rented hospitality suites, they arranged sit-down meetings with senior conservatives, such as Ed Fast, and they hosted a major reception at Halifax Old Triangle Irish Alehouse, where they paid for food and drink. I have some context here. My dad is a doctor, and it is completely not okay if you pay for a doctor's meal, if a lobbyist does this. It is entirely not okay. And in fact, what we used to have were these basically vacations for the family, which is why I had a fun time at them, but they would be informationals for the doctors. The doctors were forced to pay for food, they were forced to pay to get the right out there, they were forced to pay for lodging, and basically the actual drug companies didn't really give them anything. But here we see dairy lobbyists are quite alright with basically buying politicians, which, you know, free food and drink, I wonder how much they spent per politician on that. No small number. The binder included specific instructions on how dairy representatives can target and approach conservatives at the reception. It would be recommended to utilize the farmers present to mingle with delegates and talk about the importance of supply management, basically the importance of socialism. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer is dubbed the safety net. This is one thing that worries me. This next paragraph here is kind of ridiculous. Andrew Scheer is the leader of the Canadian Conservative Party. He's kind of fucking it up, to be honest, because all he really has to do is criticize Trudeau, but he refuses to go after him properly. Well, maybe I'll make a different video about that, but for now, let's just stick to the article. The most widely circulated excerpt from the binder is a section under the heading Safety Net. In it, the dairy farmers note that even if the Conservative Party membership turns against supply management, they have been assured by Scheer's office that he would not put supply management on the electoral platform, regardless of the outcome at the convention. Ridiculous. Although not ideal, this does represent a safety net should the other tactics fail. It writes, dairy representatives are also told to win over conservative delegates with the line, Andrew Scheer supports supply management. Unreal. I can't believe that he would associate his name with this. Especially given the opinions by conservatives in Canada, where 56%, this was in a different poll, but whatever. 56% of conservatives are against supply management, and something like 23% are for it. So, it's an opinion that the conservatives in Canada don't hold. But of course, Andrew Scheer doesn't care because his incentives as a politician are not to make people happy. They're just to make people happy enough to vote for him. Anyway, moving on. A proposed social media plan even includes a photo of Scheer drinking from a carton of milk against the slogan, Love Canadian Milk. That would be, where is it? This one. So this is Andrew Scheer drinking milk. Which, I mean, I like milk, but not enough to sell at my constituents. It's from a 2017 press gallery dinner where Scheer used it to joke that there's some suggestion out there that I'm beholden to a certain group within the conservative family. Yeah, that joke, in quotations, isn't really doing much to stop people from thinking that. Scheer's office did not reply to the National Post request for comment by press time, but in an earlier statement at the Globe and Mail, a spokesman for the conservative leader said, "We never had a conversation about what they put in their briefing book." The dairy farmers provided pre-written letters for supportive conservatives. Prior to the convention, the Dairy Farmers of Canada drafted 2 pro-supply management letters, in conjunction with the conservative members intended to be circulated by delegates at the convention. One written from the perspective of a riding president, and another to be signed by supportive CPC MPs. Kind of crazy. The text makes clear that these letters are meant to be framed as organic expressions of support from conservatives and not the creation of dairy lobbyists. So you can just see how unhonest they are here. Both the conservative MPs and also the lobbyists, who, I mean, quite frankly, I'm not surprised that either of these people are corrupt or dishonest to Canadian voters, because, again, where are their incentives? The binder details a complex plan to squash any official consideration of ending supply management. On the agenda at the convention was a resolution to phase out supply management. Please do this. I'm tired of paying so much for milk. It's not even better than the milk in the US. Like, it's just big dairy farms want to make lots of money. So if they do this, they can overcharge. The binder details an incredibly complex dairy farmer strategy to quash the resolution before it goes to plenary debate, and, failing that, get it defeated. Multiple scenarios are detailed along with proposed messaging for each one. What ended up happening was that the policy was never discussed at an initial breakout session, and thus never came up for debate or inclusion in the conservative platform. The dairy farmers called this a suboptimal scenario, since it buys us a representative but doesn't put the issue to rest. What they really wanted was for the policy to be brought up at the initial session and then immediately dismissed, something the dairy farmers assumed would discourage supporters of this motion from trying again. Nevertheless, the proposed messaging for the suboptimal outcome was to say that there are still some voices in the Conservative Party that have yet to fully understand why supply management is good for Canadians. And I guess by that they mean there are still some members of the Conservative Party who have the best interests of Canadians at heart. It's clearly not going to be good for Canadians to pay extra for milk that's not actually better in quality. And this is, of course, what they say. They say, oh, we have it tested so much. The milk in Canada, it has to be the highest quality milk in Canada. So we have to test it. We have to make sure that all the cows have all these certain living conditions. And we need to make sure that every single thing about this process is as regulated as we can get it, so that only the most rich people can be in this industry. I want us to be able to produce more. I want us to be able to export that to the States. There's plenty of ranchers in Canada. There's a shit ton of cows, especially in Alberta, honestly. They're everywhere. I know many people who own cattle ranches, and many people who probably could supply some dairy milk, but what's the fucking point? What's the point? It's so expensive to do it. Dairy delegates were provided with a detailed list of MPs to watch. A table in the binder lists 34 Conservative MPs that the dairy farmers deem to be supportive, and 9 which are unsupportive. That's a scary ratio. I'm not very pleased with that ratio, that's for sure. The table also includes information on which MPs have a history of having supported Maxime Bernier, the most hated politician in Canada now, well, by a certain group, and the most loved by people who actually like Canada, because he's the only person I've seen so far who's actually willing to stand up for us. He probably should have been the leader of the Conservative Party. I didn't vote. I'm not a card-carrying member, but had I had the option, I probably would have. From everything I can see from his platform and his tweets he made, he's the best candidate for Canada. He's the closest thing we will see to a proper Trump candidate. I'm not actually a fan of Trump, but I agree with some of the things that he's done, and I think he's a much better alternative to Hillary. So Bernier can be something like that. If we call Trudeau someone like Hillary, Bernier could be the Trump to that, but, well, now I don't think that's going to happen. I think instead what's going to happen is he's going to split the Conservative vote, and then we're going to have Trudeau again, which is unfortunate. It would have been better to just have him as the leader of the Conservative Party, but we are where we are now. Back to the article, and whether they represent a riding with more than 50 dairy farms. Okay, I mean, that is relevant information. Since the binder was printed before Bernier's surprise exit from the Conservative Party, here we have a mention of that, he continues to top the list of unsupportive MPs. With Bernier gone, that list now only includes 8 politicians. Doesn't really matter who. The document includes a laundry list of dairy lobby talking points. Dairy delegates were presented with a list of pro-supply management arguments to be used if pressed on specifics by Conservative attendees. It includes the claim, supply management is not a significant trade barrier. Bullshit. Excuse me. A particularly hard-to-swallow argument when, right now, U.S. negotiators are citing supply management as the key obstacle in negotiating a new NAFTA agreement. If we're going to have free trade, then we should just have free trade. I don't understand why this is so fucking difficult. Stop protecting these industries when they don't do anything that's good for us. If American milk is cheaper and of the same quality, then I just want to drink that. If we can bring down the price of Canadian milk, then I will drink that. I would prefer to drink milk from Canada, and I would probably use my own market power to choose Canadian products, but I'm not even given the choice right now. I'm not allowed to buy outside of Canadian products. That is the problem. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Either way, Canadians may find many of these arguments familiar, since they're often being spoken by the federal politicians. In Canada, consumers pay a fair price for their milk. Yeah, you probably just don't care, Mr. Politician, because you've already, got your money, and a $4 gallon of milk isn't an issue for you. But for most people, the people who might have had their hours cut back because of the increasing minimum wage or just lost their jobs altogether, yeah, it's kind of an issue. Yeah, it's not really great. I don't have a lot of money, so when I go to the store and I think, should I buy milk or not, I usually tend to not buy milk. I'm not a huge milk drinker. I don't mind it, but whatever. I'm certainly not incentivized to do that by the prices, though. It's just, when they say we we pay a fair price, what they mean is it's not so much more that Canadians will stop buying milk. The people who want milk are still going to buy it. It's still affordable. Is it as cheap as it could have been? No, it's not. So we either don't have the milk, or we pay extra for it, meaning Canadians have been taxed so that milk producers in Canada can make more money. That is what's happened. This is just protectionism at its finest. Reads one briefing note. Take a look at the preliminary record, and you can find multiple instances of the phrase fair price being used to defend supply management by MPs in every major party. Yeah, probably. The dairy lobby repeatedly claims that they speak for Canadian voters. That's so funny. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's actually, looked into the situation of dairy farms in Canada and thought, yeah, this is a good thing. I don't know anyone. I guess, I do have that friend who works for the NDP. I'm sure he's happy about it because, that's what we want. Although, that's probably not true because the NDP is more about taxes just directly from the government. They're like, I want this stuff. Give me, the government, the stuff. So they're probably not a fan of this. They would rather get the money themselves through the tax and then give it to their friends. That's what they would prefer. But I guess this is basically that. Anyway, so whatever. A major appeal of the strategy outlined in the binder is that, without uncompromising support for supply management, the Tories are throwing away their electoral chances. I already talked earlier about how Conservatives would prefer not having supply management. We don't need to again. Had the Conservatives approved a resolution to phase out supply management, dairy delegates were instructed to say, as we prepare for the next federal election, Canadians will remember the position taken by the Conservatives today and vote for them for it. To bolster this point, the binder includes a DFC commissioned Nanos poll. I don't know what that is. Nanos is a polling firm, I'm guessing? Not sure. Claiming that nearly 3/4 of Canadians support supply management. Sure. It would be fair to say the study is a little biased, given that it called upon people to ask them their opinions on a system in which farmers work to ensure a stable supply of their products, lessening price fluctuations while ensuring a stable income for Canadian farmers. Notably, when the Angus Reid Institute polled Canadians about supply management last year, only 29% said it was worth keeping in a trade dispute. Wow, it's like when you have a question worded how they have it, where we just want to keep prices stable and we want to keep Canadian farmers in work. People are a little less sure about what you're talking about. But when you ask someone, hey, do you like the fact that the Canadian government taxes you so that dairy farmers can have more money? No, people don't like this. 29%. Maybe they do like it, but even then, it's not worth keeping in a trade dispute, which is exactly what we're having with the states. So, 29% of people said that they should keep the dairy farm regulations, and everyone else, presumably, was either neutral or for getting rid of them. But we have the concerns of the Canadian voter at heart. That's what we really care about. We want to make sure that Canadian dairy farmers are provided for. It's nothing more than that. Let's check some of these comments. Politicians bought and paid for to the detriment of Canadian taxpayers. Truth. Exactly. Manin Kokar scam. Okay. Sure. Not sure what that means. Andrew Scheer has lost the offensive and opportunity to win. During the last year, he has failed to develop any significant name recognition or brand with Canadians. That's true. Most people who don't care about conservative politics or politics in general don't have a fucking clue who he is. I've talked to many people who just don't know who Andrew Scheer is. They just have no idea. They know who Maxime Bernier is now, but they have no idea who Andrew Scheer is. And for good reason. He's basically not done a very good job of building himself, and it's the sad thing is all he has to do is criticize Trudeau. That's all he has to do. And if he's truthful about it, and if he fact checks Trudeau properly, he will gain popularity. There's no doubt. But that is not what he does. He just kind of tiptoes, and he doesn't want to offend anyone. It's sad. The sad fact is that now the first thing that most Canadians will learn about Andrew Scheer is that he sold his own party to the socialist dairy cartel in order to satisfy his own leadership ambitions. Instead of defining himself, the Liberals will now... the Liberals will now set the narrative. Rather than credibly attacking Justin Trudeau's horrific leadership record, Andrew Scheer will spend the next 16 months trying, and likely failing, to explain away his history with supply management. Max Bernier or no Max Bernier. He has misspelled Bernier, but that's fine. Andrew Scheer's chance of election stand at 0%. I don't know if it's that bad. I think with Bernier they could have won. I don't know. As far as I know, they can't really replace him at this point, so that's who we're going with. And that's probably who I'll have to vote for. But, it feels bad. This time to call for an emergency leadership review. Oh, it's time to call for an emergency leadership review. Turf Scheer and beg Max Bernier to come back. He's the only one who has, by virtue of calling out a morally corrupt party and walking away. demonstrated the principles necessary to erase this tarnish to the CPC brand. Get out, Andrew. Okay. The liberal pretending to be a conservative. How surprising. Well, I don't know Phil Rack, so that may well be true, but generally agree with what he said. Andrew Scheer's been pretty bad. Kevin Landry. Nope. I am the person who actually believes in conservative principles and ideology rather than the color of the tie. Yeah, color of the tie is basically pointless. Everyone should know this, but, you know, if someone wears a blue tie, blue is conservative from Canada, but speaks red, and red being liberal, yeah, it doesn't really fucking matter. You and I have argued the same side of many issues in the past. I wish you would remember that before labeling me a liberal. Maybe these guys know each other. I'm with you, Phil. Yeah, mostly am as well. Kevin Landry. Why do you lay this at the feet of Trudeau? This has basically been Canadian policy since 1972 and was reiterated policy as recently as 2007 by Harper. Yep, that's a mistake on Harper there. I wish he'd gotten rid of it. You know, for the most part, I was quite happy with Harper, or looking back, I didn't really pay much attention then. All I knew about was the meme of him eating my baby, or his dingo eating my baby, excuse me. But, you know, looking back, I kind of miss him. No politician is going to shoot themselves in the foot by taking a stand against 12% of the agricultural industry in Canada. Scheer won't stand against it. Bernier won't either. But neither of those are different than Trudeau's support for it. Whether or not it's proper policy is another issue. By trying to paint this as a liberal versus conservative issue is narrow-minded and simplistic. That's fair. That's fair. It has been both parties. Both parties were wrong, though. So, it's fine to criticize, but that is a fair comment. And people who actually find this shocking about Scheer, okay, sorry about that. The man is almost as transparent and shallow as Junior, being Trudeau. By the way, we should be calling him Castro Jr., just so everyone knows, but definitely a liberal light version of him. Hey, here's an idea. If Trudeau dumps supply-side management for by the weekend and saves the Canadian auto industry, maybe real conservatives should start considering switching over to vote liberal. Yeah. If Scheer can flip-flop over to liberal light mode, then why can't we? Okay. I'd say that's a bit too much trust for Trudeau, but fair. Phil Rack, the gentleman from earlier, there is little difference in policy between Scheer and Trudeau. I hate to admit that, but it's true. But that doesn't mean we should all vote liberal. People are crying out for real conservative leadership. I wasn't sure how to say real there, but we went with that. Who is willing to propose and defend real conservative values. Small government, free markets, freedom, equality, and tolerance. Phil Rack, yeah, that seemed like a joke, but I jest, of course. When Bernier's party is set up, and if our trade issues are still not resolved with the auto industry still sitting in the balance, voting for Bernier is the only sane route to go. For all rational Canadians. Extremist lefties out to grab power through anarchy won't agree, of course, but Canadians will see right through that hellish nightmare. Yeah, the support for Trudeau, from what I've seen, is from basically progressives. A lot of the traditional liberals I've known are not actually very happy with Trudeau. Again, I live in Alberta, so they're going to be more right-wing than liberals from Ontario, which is a place that, as far as I know, Trudeau has quite a bit of support in. But yeah, I don't know. It really does seem like the only reason to vote for Trudeau is his name. I think that's how he got elected. And then now, if you agree with radical progressive politics, you should continue to vote for him. Those are about the only people who really support Trudeau at this point. There's a huge difference. One is an incompetent weasel, and the other is just a weasel. I'm assuming the incompetent weasel is Scheer, and the weasel is Trudeau, although Trudeau is quite incompetent as well, so I would classify them both as incompetent weasels. But that's doing a disservice to weasels. The idea is to get elected. Well, for Trudeau, I think Scheer is probably just a weasel. The idea is to get elected. Yep. And farmers are a key. Yep. If you don't think the dairy lobbyist doesn't have, if you don't think the dairy lobby doesn't have money, nice sentence, you are mistaken. If Scheer doesn't get elected, it's 4 more years of the groper. If the Canadian economy sinks or swims based on the dairy industry, you can be sure that Scheer won't stand on his principle, but will get the best deal possible without the BS. The grower, on the other hand, we can only be sure that he will screw it up. Yeah, basically. India trip is about all the evidence you need to see that Trudeau just can't do anything right. Kevin Landry, the idea is to get elected and implement a conservative policy. Agree. Did you hear that Scheer's plan for the migrant crisis to reclassify the illegal/regular migrants as TFWs and give them a path to citizenship? Truth from Michelle Rempel. Oh man, if that's true. I'm not actually sure if that's true or not. I have not heard, but that's rough if that's true. I think you get it from these comments here. People are mostly not very happy about this, and the general opinion of Canadians on dairy farming is that it should not be regulated so much by the government. But here's one that's critical. So let's go through this. This article is heavily biased, although thank you for the link to the actual briefing binder. After reading the binder, I have a couple observations. One, it is not that sophisticated. I could easily see this coming out of a fourth-year MBA business strategy class. Okay. The DFC expresses strong belief that they are acting in the best interest of Canadians. This is debatable, but I tend to agree with the DFC. Okay, so you like socialism. This guy, Darcy O'Farrell, he's a fan. He likes the government control. He wants them to tell him what he's allowed to buy. Not to protect him, but to tell him what he's allowed to purchase. You know, how many Americans do you hear of getting sick because of, I don't know, contaminated milk or something in the U.S.? It's not something that's boosted too much here, and I think that if I were a DFC lobbyist, I would boost every single instance of U.S. or issues with U.S. products as far as dairy is concerned. Oh, this guy got sick because of contaminated yogurt. Click, 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 click. Everybody talk about this. Everybody let everyone in Canada know. Put it on the news, but there's not really that much you hear about it. Anyway, Canada does subsidize the dairy industry while the U.S. does to the tune of over $20 billion. Canada does not subsidize the dairy industry. That is such an incorrect statement. I'm not really sure how to address it other than, no. You see, regulating something at the behest of lobbyists is the same as subsidizing it. You're taxing Canadians and giving the dairy industry that money, the dairy producers. That's what that is. There's no other way to look at it. Either they could directly tax and then give them the money, or they could regulate out competition and allow them to form cartels to increase the price to the point where they've basically done the same thing anyway, which is exactly what they've done. So, effectively, yeah, Canada does subsidize the dairy industry. It costs money as well to make a law like that, and to keep it in place as well. I mean, you have to stop people from doing the thing. You have to make sure that all the milk that's sold meets whatever standards. So there's inspections that need to happen. You know, there's obviously this lobbying costs money, and that's a part of the money that they're taking from the Canadian citizens is going towards lobbying. So there are costs there. You know, it's not free to do this. So, no. Canada does not subsidize the dairy industry is an infactual statement. Thus, SM is not unfair supply management. It's not unfair as the U.S. claims it is. It is unfair to Canadians, mostly. Again, Canadians are the ones who really are hurt by this, not Americans. I mean, yeah, okay, Americans want to sell milk in Canada. Okay, the market's like 30 million people. Okay, it's not nothing, don't get me wrong, but really, it's not like they're missing out on this magnificently huge chunk of change. It's the people producing milk in Canada who are making out like bandits, as opposed to the people in the States really being that affected by it. And if milk is more expensive to produce here, then we wouldn't take up any of their share, to be honest. Whatever. Dismantling SM without replacing it with heavy subsidies could be the death knell for many farms in Canada. Ironically, the U.S. complains about Canada's subsidies of Bombardier, allowing the company to sell in the U.S. market at lower prices. Yeah, both of these things can be bad. If subsidizing one industry is bad, then subsidizing the other industry is also bad. It's not like subsidizing planes is okay while subsidizing milk isn't, or the other way around. It's both bad. The death knell for many farms in Canada. this is, maybe an unpopular opinion, but I don't care. Like, if that farm can't produce milk at an efficient rate and therefore can't compete with other farms, then they shouldn't be producing milk. It's a waste of money to be having this farm that can't produce properly take these resources and produce at an inefficient rate. I'd rather that not happen. Maybe that capital can be spent somewhere else. Maybe instead of producing milk, they should be, ranching. I have no idea. But if they cannot compete, then they should not be in business. And even if this is some family farm, I understand this seems cold-hearted. But really, if we're going to protect people from losing their job, then that is just going to be more expensive for Canadians in the long run. It's going to be worse for us. The only people who benefit are that farm. And sorry, I don't think that everyone in the country should be taxed for the benefit of individuals. It doesn't matter who they are, right? Now, you can make an argument, does that mean that welfare shouldn't exist? I don't know, maybe, but, if these farms are not able to compete, then, sorry man, you shouldn't be making milk. The economic arguments also appear sound. Doubtful. The dairy farmers do add significant value to the economy and support rural communities. Okay, so if they add value, I'm perfectly willing to agree with that. They certainly might. But if they add value, and that value is not as much as it would be if the money were somewhere else, those investors were not in that business because it's an efficient farm, we're losing money because of these. Right? So if these farms can't compete, and they're not able to produce the product properly, then our capital should be somewhere else, and our GDP would be higher. So, this is not relevant. It doesn't matter how big it is. If it's in an inefficient manner, and if it's produced inefficiently, it's still worse than the alternative. This guy's assuming that, this money would just disappear without the dairy farmers. That's not really how money works. It doesn't just disappear. It just goes somewhere else. So, this is just incorrect, economically speaking. I expect many communities would fall if the farms around them were to fail. Maybe. But if those communities would fall without the farms, then those communities probably shouldn't be there, and they should just move somewhere else. It is also likely that they are correct that grocery store prices would be largely unaffected. Really? Okay. I don't actually know this, so it might be worth looking up, but what's the price of a gallon of milk in the States against a gallon of milk in Canada? As far as I remember, it's cheaper in the States. I've been there a few times. I like the States. They got some good stuff there. So, even if the only effect is that we start buying U.S. milk and Canadian dairy farmers disappear, let's say that's what happens. If it's cheaper for Canadians, okay, well, the consumers aren't really hurt by that. And if these people cannot compete again, the money's in the wrong place then. So, it's kind of like a win-win. And it might hurt in the short run, sure. That's fair, but in the long run, this is going to be what works out better. It is also likely that they're correct. Retailers charge what the market will bear with no consideration of the cost of production. Yes, limiting supply management may make retailers better off and not necessarily consumers. What? No. See, if it becomes cheaper to produce, then you can charge less for the milk. And if you charge less for the milk, more people will buy it. Artificially increasing the cost of producing something also increases the cost of buying it for consumers. Without fail. They don't just set their prices at some point above where they will make the most money. If you've ever looked at a supply and demand graph, you will see there's a little point where they intersect. Right? And that is not chargeable if the cost of producing the milk is too high. If the cost of producing the milk is too high, then the price must go up. So they're either overcharging, which I find very odd, but that would probably be something to do with the lack of competition within the dairy market, or they're charging the right amount, and they could charge less without these regulations. Either are better than what we have now. Lastly, assuming for the moment that dismantling SM will reduce prices, it is not in the best interest of Canadians to have cheaper dairy. What? There is a wealth of research indicating that such products are primary contributors to heart disease and autoimmune diseases. See the China study? Okay. So he's saying that Canadians cannot be trusted to make their own decisions. And instead, what we need to do is regulate the industry to make sure that Canadians don't buy too much milk. You know, the Canadians who want to buy milk and are buying it anyway, they're going to be better off because the prices are going to be lower. They're going to have more income to spend on other things. You've just increased their income, essentially. But they're actually worse off because now they'll buy the things that they want to buy. Oh. The products of the US, which would become available in Canada without SM, are also lower quality due to less restrictions on the use of hormones, which may have a negative health consequence. Well, you know, that might well be true in the short run. But again, proper competition, and if these dairy producers want to make it known that they don't use hormones, they can do that. You know, A&W in Canada, they're always talking about it. Always in their commercials. No hormones, no steroids, no hormones, no steroids. I'm assuming this is because some people buy it because of that. It's not that hard to print extra ink on your label, but it is hard to regulate. So, if it's better, and if you can prove that having no hormones in the milk is healthier, you can market your product with that. And since A&W is doing this, and there's other companies that do it as well, I think, I was going to say McDonald's, but I actually don't think they do that here. Anyway, but you know, if companies are doing this, and you see that on products in the in the grocery store all the time, then they'll just do that, and that'll be a form of the competition. You know, you pay 50 cents more a gallon for milk, but it's got no hormones in it. Is that worth it for you? Okay, well, if you can prove to me that not having hormones in the milk is a good thing, then yeah, sure. Okay, I'll spend 50 cents a gallon more or whatever to buy milk when I rarely do. That's not a problem for me. That sounds great. Just saying, oh, well, we need to regulate it to keep people safe, to limit what you are allowed to buy, is not effective. Overall, I'm yet to see a convincing argument against SM, except that Trump may stop with the bully tactics. Lol. The contents of the binder are nothing more than one would expect of a trade association and are hardly sinister. Here, a trade association on its own is the sinister thing, though. I don't really care what it is. If they're sitting here trying to convince politicians to regulate our economy, I'm against it. And that's not very difficult for me. It doesn't matter what's in the book. The book could have just said, oh, I don't know, like, tell them that milk in Canada tastes better. Okay, well, I don't, it doesn't fucking matter. It's the fact that they're trying to limit the choices of Canadian consumers. That's the issue. Phil Rack from earlier, you are arguing for a central planned cartel that actively subverts the free market. What it definitely is not is a conservative idea, but it doesn't matter. This article is not about whether or not SM is a good idea or a bad idea. Correct. This article is about whether or not Andrew Scheer objectively and independence has been compromised. Sorry. This article is about whether Andrew Scheer's objectivity and independence has been compromised. That makes more sense. It is about whether he puts his personal leadership ambitions above his party, which it seems like he does. The simple fact that the DFC believes Andrew Scheer to be their stopper clearly indicates that he has, and he did. Everything else is irrelevant to this discussion. Phil, I'm not inclined to believe policymakers should adopt positions for any reason other than the beliefs about the public good, i.e. whether it's a conservative ideal. Sorry. I'm not inclined to believe policymakers should adopt positions for any reason other than beliefs about the public good. Oh, okay, so you agree that what Andrew Scheer is doing is bad. Cool. You're correct. As I see it at the moment, SM is beneficial. I could be wrong with all other supporters, but that's at issue. I interpret this article as vandalizing the DFC. I make 2 points about that. The first is that characterization as being highly cunning is over the top. The second is that there are seemingly valid arguments for their position that are closer to reasonable than propaganda, thus their arguments are relevant. That was propaganda, pretty clearly. Anyone who studies economics would tell you that regulating something does not generally lead to better products. It almost always leads to more expensive products that aren't as good. Darcy, I kind of disagree. Lobby groups exist to attempt to bribe politicians. It is their reason for existence. Uh, it's like the scorpion and the turtle. You can't blame a scorpion for being a scorpion. Not doing a good job of devandalizing the DFC. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame a lobby group for being shitty people who want to reduce the choices of consumers so that they can line their pockets. Oh wait, I can do that. It is Andrew Shearer who should have the principles to say that SM is not in keeping with the ideologies and principles of conservatism and not accept the bribe. That would make him the turtle. Phil, I tend to agree with you. Voter buying is extremely frustrating. I'm done reading comments. I think everyone gets it. Canadian consumers in general are not a fan of this, at least the people posting here. And I think I've made decent arguments as to why the socialist policies of these people is not so great. I hope you enjoyed the video. That went a little long here. About 40 minutes is more than I expected to get out of this article. Have a good day.